Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. I can't believe that I'm about to announce this, but apparently, Kamala Harris is now set to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. I guess she really is a plagiarist, huh? Anything Trump does, Kamala's there to put the MAGA hat on and essentially replicate. Donald Trump says no tax on tips. Kamala Harris comes out the next week, no tax on tips. And after years of saying that no illegal is a criminal and that essentially the border should be wide open, Kamala Harris then follows up once again, tainting her skin orange and putting on the red cap. Now all of a sudden, she's a real border hawk. It's absolutely unbelievable. But of course, the common denominator throughout all of this is one thing and one thing alone, and that's absolute sheer desperation. Panic. They know, folks. They freaking know. They know they're tanking in the polls. I mean, it's pretty much obvious to everybody. And so Kamala Harris she's got to do it. She thought she was going to be able to get through this whole election cycle being in the basement just like Joe, but of course that isn't the case at all. She's now being forced to show her face, and so this is peak desperation. She's got to actually do interviews, and in this case, she's got to go into the lion's den, but I don't think this is going to fare too well for her. Let's have a conversation about that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so you might have thought that I was pulling your leg, and honestly, nothing's official, so this could be inaccurate. It's just a report, what people are suggesting. Apparently, Kamala Harris is now set to make an appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast. I'll tell you one thing, it's certainly an upgrade from the Call Her Daddy podcast. Boy, what an absolute disaster that was. But even though it's a podcast upgrade, I don't think this is going to be better for Kamala Harris. No, not even close. In fact, I think the fallout from this is probably going to be much worse than what we saw after Kamala Harris's appearance on that very lewd podcast. I think this might be the end of her campaign, to be completely honest with you. A lot of people are panicking. Some people are writing some very weird posts on X, going after Joe Rogan, claiming he's a traitor. I guess the implication is that Joe Rogan should only have Trump on his show, try to make Trump look good, and then deny Kamala Harris the opportunity. It's a really weird take, and obviously we know Joe Rogan's not that kind of partisan. I wouldn't even necessarily say that he's on our side in particular. I don't really get it, and honestly, I'm not really looking for a skewed approach here. You know, leave those kind of tactics to the left-wing mainstream media. All I'm looking for is some actual transparency. Absolutely, let both candidates show up and grill them both. I don't care if Joe Rogan grills Donald Trump. You know why? Because Trump's ready for it, and Trump's going to answer those questions effectively and probably change a lot of people's minds. Meanwhile, on the other side, I don't think that's happening. There's no freaking way. There is so much the left has done that is just simply indefensible. And we know that Joe Rogan knows this. I've played so many clips just yesterday. I played a little montage covering some of Joe Rogan's rants. You know, Rogan gets it. And he especially gets this whole thing with Kamala Harris. That's not going to bode so well for her. You know, if she's challenged on some of these issues.
The video, her saying Elon's going to have to follow the same rules as Facebook.
What rules?
You can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
That's crazy. You have First Amendment rights of free speech. What's really wild is the Babylon Bee had a hilarious little caption. They said, when I get in office, I'm going to change things, says the woman who's in office right now.
Yeah.
Because she's in office.
Yeah.
She's talking about fixing all these things.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
from
you're
day one,
literally the vice president.
Did
Did you see the thing where Trump came out and said that he was going to stop taxes for tips of hospitality workers, and you wouldn't tax them on tips anymore?
Yeah, that was like a month and a half ago.
Yeah, and then she came out and said she's going to do it.
Right.
And she's going to stop tips.
As
and everybody
if,
cheered as if it was her idea. But here's the problem. In 2022, she was one of the deciding votes to go after people that were not reporting their tip. You know, so everybody forever was like, Kamala Harris is the worst vice president. She's the least popular vice president of all time. And then in a moment in time, all of a sudden she's our solution. She's our hero. Everybody's with her. All these social media posts about her. Try Googling a negative story on her. You won't find one.
So
Ta-da!
Okay, you know, Kamala Harris has done this little media tour and she's yet to have been asked really one single good question. There's been some decent questions, specifically in that 60-minute interview, but they were framed very lightly, and Kamala Harris was allowed to respond with no real pushback. I know it's not going to be the same with Rogan because I trust him to be, at bare minimum, intellectually honest and to really challenge. You know, Joe Rogan doesn't have editors telling him what he can or can't say. He's the frickin' boss. He gets to do what he wants. And we know his track record, he's pretty good with this stuff. He's not only honest, but he's good at sensing BS. And that right there, you know, like I always say, folks, that's the left's kryptonite. That's why they operate in this purposely created information vacuum. They don't want people to know the actual truth, and so they craft these narratives, they craft their alternative reality, and they prefer to live there. They don't want to leave. They never leave unless they absolutely have to. And now apparently Kamala Harris absolutely has to, and it's not going to go well for her. What does Kamala Harris need? Well, as we all know, she needs to be sitting across with a friend, with a person who is literally there to make her look good. Likely, this is my assumption, she probably has an idea of what's going to be asked and, you know, what the topics are ahead of time she could prepare. And then, of course, what we've seen throughout all of these interviews, the editing. Kamala Harris has yet to do a real sit-down interview that has been unedited, just a conversation between two people. Well, what's the Joe Rogan podcast? It's a 2-hour sit-down conversation, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 hours. Definitely won't be 4 hours, probably not even 3 or 2 with Kamala. I don't think she's interesting enough to keep a conversation going on that long. But regardless, it's going to be unedited. She's going to have to sit there and be unable to just revert to the default talking points. Not exactly her forte. And actually, interestingly enough, as I'm recording this video, it's popping up on my timeline that not only is Kamala Harris supposedly doing the Joe Rogan podcast, but apparently she's going to be doing a sit-down interview on Fox News with Bret Baier. And according to him, even this interview, again, is going to be unedited.
We have roughly 30 minutes. I was waiting to hear what the timing was going to be on commercial breaks because of the powers that be. We're going to do it uninterrupted, unedited, straight through the whole interview, nothing left off, and then we're going to take a commercial break and come back with a panel. So I assume I'll get to a lot of questions, and if you had to guess, Stuart, it's the issues that people tell pollsters are most important.
I don't see how she does it. Now, I'm not surprised that they picked Bret Baier as their choice for the interviewer here. He's not exactly a Trump fan, and now that Chris Wallace is no longer at CNN, I guess he's the last best option. But even with that being said, I don't think he's this great ally to the Democrat Party, and I don't think he has any intention of going in there and engaging in this softball nonsense that we've seen thus far. You know, if you watch Bret Baier's segments regularly, he's not the worst. He certainly knows the issues, and I think he's going to press her on it. And so basically we got however many weeks left. What is it, 3 weeks left? Actually, I think a little bit less than 3 weeks. It's the last-ditch effort, the last little blitz here, and Kamala's got to get it done. She's finally going to be held to account. She's going to be asked hard questions, and she has to justify herself. She needs to convince a whole chunk of the population now that she's the person for the job. You think she could get the job done? Honestly, I really don't think so. Mainly because of what I said previously. Most of this stuff that she needs to now defend is simply indefensible. I mean, she's literally unelected. How do you defend that? And how do you come back from her blunder from just the other day, where she said basically on 2 occasions that she wouldn't do anything differently compared to Joe Biden, knowing that the Biden administration and its policies have been an utter disaster for the American people? How does she crawl out of that hole? I mean, you have to be a master of BS to get that job done. You have to be the most skilled politician, the greatest swindler known to mankind. Is that Kamala Harris? No, it's not. She doesn't exactly have a way with words. If anything, you know, just like truth is her enemy, I'd say the English language. Words are her mortal enemy. Kamala Harris doesn't do so good in an environment where she has to be authentic because she's trained her entire life to be your prototypical, disingenuous, non-authentic politician. She's only good at one thing: empty platitudes. She says the same thing over and over again. The aspirations, the dreams of the people. I was born in the middle class. I mean, for Pete's sakes. The entire internet has been memeing on her for those exact words, this exact same nonsense that she keeps trying to pull off. And then during her Univision town hall just the other day, she responded with this after one of the questions.
My question to you is, what is your plan to improve the medical system?
Look, I come from the middle class. My mother was a working woman who raised me and my sister. My mother was able to finally, she saved up to be able to afford to buy a home by the time I was a teenager. I know everyone has ambition, works hard, has aspirations, but doesn't necessarily have all the resources that other people have.
It's crazy. I mean, she has to know, right? She has to know that RFK Jr. was roasting her for exactly that. The entire internet is playing clips of her saying the aspirations, the dreams. I was born in a middle-class family. And then when asked a question, she immediately defaults to, I was born in a middle-class family, the aspirations and the dreams and the ambitions of the people. You know, she presents herself as a slick politician because she's able to regurgitate the script, but it takes more than that. You know, that stuff may pass in San Francisco, where all you need is to check a couple identity boxes and boom, you're right in office, just like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York and the others in those kind of districts. Absolutely, that works. But if you're in an actual contested, real election, you need more than that. You need a whole lot more. And Kamala Harris simply doesn't have it. Now, I really don't know if she's actually going to show up. I kind of doubt it. There's no way she's actually going to do this. But if she does show up on Joe Rogan, it's going to be the end of her campaign. It's game over. In fact, I think even showing up on Fox News might be enough to really seal the deal for Donald Trump. We know what happens. When Donald Trump shows up on one of these big media events, he gains voters every single time. Trump rallies are actually highly successful, and so are his interviews. You know, sometimes Trump loses people with the bravado, but when he actually sits down and has a real conversation with people, or when he's presenting his ideas effectively, he wins people over. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, every single time she shows her face and every single time she opens her mouth, it's a PR nightmare, a disaster, and she loses voters. And we've seen that in the data. We've seen that as this election has gone on, this very short-lived 3-month election. And this right here, well, this might be the pinnacle of her political demise. At least that's my opinion. That's what I think. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, friends, and I'll see you on the next one.